What's up, everybody? I'm DJ Vlad, and this is how I created VladTv. So it was 2008. I was a mixtape DJ at the time. I was also doing DVDs, and YouTube came around. It was already around, but 2008 is when the partner program came around, which meant that you could actually make money off commercials, off of YouTube videos. So right away, it just, a light bulb went up over my head, and I'm like, okay, this is going to be the next big thing. This is what's going to take over the world, because the fact you could actually make money off the videos, and other sites, bigger sites, could actually embed the video. So I started basically doing interviews, which is what I was already doing with my DVDs, but I was uploading them to the YouTube channel, and I started hitting up the other blogs, like Now Right was one of the early supporters, as well as like All Hip Hop and SOHH and Hip Hop DX and so forth. And I just went all out. I dropped all the DJ shit that I was doing. I dropped the DVDs. I just did this full time. And it was just a matter of, when I first started, I said, okay, I'm going to drop content every day, 365 days a year. Everybody thought it was stupid. They thought it was way too much. Who wants to watch a new video every day? Who wants to watch a 5-minute video? Why not just drop the full video? So I just kept doing it day after day, year after year. Then VladTv.com, the website, was launched like maybe a year later. So it kind of became another business, another income stream. And it was basically taking all the news from around the internet that's kind of hip hop related, and also allowed me a chance to actually put my YouTube videos on a website and expose them to that audience. To make a long story short, we just kept doing it year after year. I really looked at hip-hop journalism at the time, and I always thought it was lame. I always thought that it was more PR than actual journalism. I looked up to outlets like 60 Minutes. When you do an interview with 60 Minutes, it makes waves. It causes laws to change. It causes governments to topple. It causes revolutions. That's what I wanted to accomplish. But when I looked at all the other interviewers in hip hop, it was just the artists would go there and it'd be a PR session. It'd be a bunch of softball questions. Nothing uncomfortable. All the stuff that people talk about in barbershops were never mentioned in these interviews. So I said, well, not on VladTv. We're going to really go all out and ask the tough questions, ask the uncomfortable questions, ask the hard-hitting questions. And that's what we started doing. And we got a lot of pushback over it. A lot of people had an issue with the questions. People called us the feds, the FBI, the police, which people still do to this day. But that was the original plan, and that's something that we kind of carried on to this day. Over the years, we've had a lot of interesting interviews. The Soulja Boy interview was an interesting one. It triggered the Soulja Boy challenge. It still circulates to this day in memes. The Omarion interview that just dropped last year, when he talked about the whole Little Fizz, April Jones situation, that became the #1 trending video on YouTube for like a week. A lot of very dope interviews of me just talking to people that I was fans of as a kid. We recently did Shaheem, who I was a big fan of when I was younger. And it was great to see an interview like this getting millions of views by an artist that really hasn't been in the limelight for quite a while, and he just did 6 years in prison. I got to interview people like Ice-T. I got to interview some of the hood legends from my hometown, like Lil D, who was the crack king of Oakland. I got to interview Freeway Ricky, who was part of the whole Iran-Contra scandal. I got to interview some of my favorite actors, like John Witherspoon, when I did one of his last interviews. I got to interview Keefe D, who was in the car that ended up shooting up Tupac's car in Las Vegas. He's the last surviving member in that car. Everyone else in that car is dead. Just a lot of very kind of off-the-wall interviews that you don't really know that you want to hear until you actually hear them. And that, to me, is always kind of the biggest accomplishment. It's one thing if you get a Chris Brown interview, yeah, you could put that out with pretty much any set of questions and it'll get millions of views. But when you look at some of the biggest interviews that we have, they're usually by people you've never heard of. Like Mob James was our second biggest interview last year, got 13 million views combined. This was one of the heads of the Mob Piru Bloods in Compton that kind of brought all the Bloods over to death row through Suge Knight. That interview was a very emotional interview. His brother got killed at death row, so he was crying through part of the interview. And it was a person that most people had never heard of before, but that interview got 13 million views. And in the same breath, Mob James actually got a career out of that interview. He ended up going on tour in Australia. He has his own podcast now that's doing very well, called the Gangster Chronicles, and so forth. And, there's always been a balance of the people that I have always wanted to talk to, the artists that I grew up listening to, the new artists that are about to blow up. Like, for example, I did the Migos first interview before Drake did Versace with them. I did one of Big Sean's first interviews and so forth. That's always dope that we can get people who become superstars later on. But at the end of the day, my purpose here is to document hip hop culture, urban culture, film culture, street culture during this time, and to leave it to the future generations of people who, all the kids that are going to be doing book reports off of these interviews, and all of the people who are fans of Prince who get to watch this Morris Day interview, someone that's been with Prince from his first band in high school all the way up to the very end, and so forth. I feel it's a mission that's beyond my lifetime. It's something that's going to be around for generations and generations. And it's important. I have a drive to kind of tell these stories because we've had situations where we've given people their last interviews, like people like John Witherspoon. He never got to tell his life story except for on VladTv. And that's very special to me because I was such a huge fan of what he did. Or people like Big Low, Chief Keef's cousin, who was killed a couple days after our interview. This is what he leaves behind to the world. This is what his friends and family get to look at when they think about him. They reminisce. And then there's all the interviews that we never got to do because the person died a couple days later, like Pop Smoke. I was just on the phone with him a couple days ago, and we were planning on doing an interview next week, and then you get the tragedy of what happened. So it's one of those things. I feel it's a bigger mission than just Vlad, which is why in 2020 there's other people that are doing interviews on our platform besides myself. And at the end of the day, I hope that I leave a mark on this world, and I leave it as a better place, and I leave these stories which otherwise would have been lost in time. Well, I think the defining interview when I knew I was really on the right track, I think, was the Soulja Boy interview. When we did that interview, I didn't even really think that it was, I thought it was going to do well, but it kind of took on a life of its own. It was the first interview that we did that became memed. And not only did it become meme, but then people started creating the Soulja Boy challenge and started doing their own version of that interview where they would get in a white room and put on like a big chain that clanged around and told this whole story about some outrageous incident. And you got to the point where even real actors, like the guy who played Bobby Brown, did his own version of the Soulja Boy challenge, where him and his friends actually acted out the whole scene that was told. And then recently, one of the animators from Bob's Burgers actually created a whole cartoon of that whole Soulja Boy interview, just completely on his own. Him and his friends got together and spent like 3 months putting together this whole animation, this really like TV quality animation of that interview. That interview, when Childish Gambino dropped Feels Like Summer, there was a recreation of that interview in cartoon form. Even Virgil Abloh wanted to use part of that interview in his exhibition at the Chicago Museum of Modern Art, but they didn't want to give us an invitation to the party, so we didn't give them permission to use it. I'm like, if y'all gonna pimp me like that, y'all gonna have to just use your own shit. So yeah, I think that interview kind of changed things, and people still reference it to this day. And I'm very happy that we were able to do it. And I think we've had a few moments over the years like that. We try to do that all the time, and I'm glad people react to it.